Do you also notice something else that John Oliver does? Again, he never asks why, and then his solutions are, we already have laws, let's make them more.
Let's do the laws.
That's it. John Oliver did a recent piece on corporate consolidation, okay? Let me say a couple things. I think he's funny. I have to give him credit for crapping on AT&T because we've talked about this before. Time Warner and AT&T could be merging, and he addressed it. And I don't disagree with his points. I don't just disagree with the problems of corporate consolidation, monopolies, duopolies. So what I have a problem with is John Oliver not digging a little bit deeper, obfuscating the issues, and then of course offering no solution. So his general concept here is small businesses have not been doing well while big businesses have. Let's set this up.
It can feel like we're in a golden age of small business startups, but that isn't actually the case. The rate at which new businesses are being created has actually been steadily falling since the 1970s. And I would argue that one of the reasons for that is that big businesses have been getting even bigger.
Yes.
Sounds reasonable.
Why? So that's the question. Why? Before we do anything, let's go Socratic method. Have we had less government intervention or more? Smaller government since the 1970s or more? Well, the Code of Federal Regulations has grown from 71,000 pages in 1975 to about 178,000 pages at the end of 2015. So before we go on and we will justify our case here, I want to ask you, do you think that government can fix this problem? Because this is ultimately the solution pretty consistently across the board with John Oliver is we have these problems, we need some more regulations, we need government to step in and fix it. Do you believe, comment below, government can fix the problem of big businesses and help small businesses, or do you think they've helped create this problem? So then John Oliver goes on to list a litany of businesses that, listen, yeah, we all can't stand.
The United States has gone from having 10 large airlines back in 2000 to just 4 today. And those 4 mega airlines now dominate more than 80% of the U.S. market.
Consolidation has allowed us to do things like ancillary revenues, which is jargon for all those fees that drive you crazy. American was the first major airline to charge you for your first checked bag back in 2008. And back then, people could not believe it. Most major airlines had followed American's lead, and it was essentially the industry standard. And it is easy for that to happen when there's only a handful of big players. In fact, since then, they've added and increased bag fees multiple times, often moving in tandem, which is how those fees have gone from generating around $540 million a year a decade ago to $4.2 billion now.
Why? This is the question, right? This is the one thing. Exactly. John Oliver goes, stats, okay, good chart, we get it, and people go, wait, oh, that's 500 million, that's 4 billion, that's more than 500 million, I want that, I'm spending more, therefore, bad. Why? Why are they adding ancillary fees? Well, airlines, contrary to have a 1% profit margin. Less than 1% on average over the last 60 years. In 2012, they made an average profit of about $4 for every passenger carried.
Wow.
Now, again, okay, so we can just list that, but why? Why?
But why?
Well, the average ticket is made up of 21% or more taxes. Okay, so this becomes really expensive. Obama increased these taxes and fees while he was in office, something that's not addressed there. Now, here's something too. We're talking about small businesses versus big businesses, right? The Regional Airline Association, a group of smaller airline carriers, they actively tried to oppose Obama's legislation and spoke out against it. Why? Warning that it would hurt smaller airlines.
Who would think?
Under the Obama administration, bigger airlines, they bloomed. Smaller airlines got consolidated. And by the way, here's something else. American Airlines, they've benefited the most from bailouts or from federal subsidies. They've received benefits over $71 billion. Again, this is really important to know because if you're a small business, you're a small regional airline, it's impossible to compete with a never-ending supply of federal funds. There's a consistency across the board here where you say, this is bad, big businesses. Okay, we get it. Why? And if you ask the why, just let's not even get to who, what, when, where. Just why, it changes the context. Let's get to next clip and you'll see why.
You may well be angry with the service you get from airlines, but thanks to consolidation, they don't really need to give a shit about what you think.
This is interesting that he brings this up.
Free enterprise is still at play at work within the airlines. I thought about this when you used the baggage example, because just because you have baggage claims or you have to pay for your baggage now because it's really expensive, doesn't mean there's still competition.
Yeah.
I can go to Southwest and get my bag free if I want to, or I can pay less and go to Spirit Airlines now.
Yeah,
and
the Greyhound
pay,
bus of the sky.
It's awful. Don't do it. It's not endorsement.
You have to sidestep the
broken
weaves
down
that litter
Save
the
yourself.
aisles.
There are things that kind of are at play with free enterprise here, right? You do choose, but they're all going to, you're either going to have crappy service and low fares, or everybody's going to be roughly the same and charge you all the fees.
Well, okay, not necessarily crappy service, but services versus
Spirit
fares. You're paying for
Yeah.
an experience. And a good example, like Knockage Air was talking about, we had a duopoly with really just Verizon and AT&T. Back then, Sprint was a joke, but then you have T-Mobile entered the marketplace, Sprint, and now, all of a sudden, guess what? Unlimited plans are back, and they're cheaper than ever. Okay, so this brings us to the next business that John Oliver brings up, one that we all love to hate, and I'm surprised he would bring up.
Angry at banks? Well, the industry is dominated by just these four.
Why?
Why?
I'm pretty sure every single one
Take
of
a
those
look.
banks were bailed out. I could be wrong about one, but I'm pretty sure they were all bailed out. But if you look at 2008 big bank bailout, heavily supported by Democrats. Let's bring this. The total cost is going to end up being over $20 trillion. This is something he doesn't want to bring up again. Big banks. People don't like big banks. I understand. This was the idea of too big to fail. Bernie Sanders acts like he has some kind of a monopoly on this idea of big banks are bad. No, you know what? That was the original Tea Party. That was the Santelli rant. We were talking about too big to fail. The West Indies Trading Company employed a fifth of population Earth. They went bankrupt. No one is too big to fail, but the local banks who operated on an honest profit margin can't compete with Bank of America, can't compete with Wells Fargo if it's a never-ending supply of federal funding. What should happen, Bank of America, not too big to fail, they go under, and then Bank of Texas, Bank of Michigan, or whatever, Chemical Bank or Ally Bank takes its place. Instead, banks don't have to offer better services. They continue being crappy. They become these too big to fail leviathans, and everyone hates it. And John Oliver does a piece about it, inevitably saying, hey, we need more big government, which led to the problem in the first place. Let's go on to another company.
Frustrated with your health insurance provider? Odds are it's one of these.
Why?
Why?
Why do we think that entry into insurance could be limited? Okay, since the Affordable Care Act implementation, let's look at this. The rate of hospital mergers has nearly doubled. The Affordable Care Act regulations on insurers and on physician practices are also driving historic merger activity among doctor practices. Okay.
In other words, bad.
So what does this do? It makes it smaller for smaller hospitals, medical practices to survive. It increases consolidation and it drives up patient costs. If you look at, we've gone through airlines, okay?
Yeah.
Banks and insurance companies. Do you want to go education? You want to pick the single most regulated industries in the entire country? What else can we do?
I'll throw automobiles in there.
Yeah, let's throw automobiles in there. There's a great example, right? The big three. If you never had any bailouts, you'd probably have the medium-sized 10. Hey, I created a great car. It's a lot better than that Chevy nobody wants because it blows up on the road. Sorry, $80 billion is going to bail out the big three. So they're going to continue making that pile of crap, even though no one buys it, and they can't operate in an honest profit margin thanks to the UAW. So you keep that car in your back pocket, but you're not going to be able to compete for another 2 decades until the next bailout rolls around. And then, it's like you're waiting to come out for air from the oh, okay, I can finally, and we're going to stuff your head back under because these guys are getting a big bailout.
Sacrificial lambs.
This is what happens, and John Oliver doesn't talk about this. Government creates problems with red tape, taxes, tariffs, fees, making it nearly impossible to compete in the workspaces.
I don't know, in fact, he was born in January 20th of this year, Stephen. I don't know if you know that. That's where all his facts come from. January 20th and forward. He's not familiar with history beyond that.
Then we have too big to fail companies. Inevitably need and take federal subsidies, which of course they get. Then these too big to fail companies either purchase a smaller competition or due to their federal subsidies, they make it impossible for the smaller businesses to compete. That's what happened. Government creates problems, then they say, oh, this company's too big to fail because look at all the problems it created, we can't let them go under. And then those companies create more problems, they buy out smaller companies, and government continues to grow. But hey, maybe it's not all bad. What solutions does John Oliver have?
The point is, we have laws to prevent the worst effects of consolidation, and it may well be time to more aggressively use them, to impose stricter standards and to empower the FTC and the DOJ's antitrust divisions.
But no, I mean, he just went and he just talked about how smaller businesses haven't done well since the 70s, and we showed you that there was about 75,000 regulations in the book, now over 178,000. We have more rules. We have stricter, there's bigger government than ever. This idea that it's this deregulated Wild West. It's the exact opposite of that.
It's like Owen talks about. It's like cheering on the government step in to save the day is like applauding the abusive husband for taking his wife to the hospital. Yeah. It's like, this is retarded.
So do you also notice something else that John Oliver does? Again, he never asks why, and then his solutions are, we already have laws, let's make them more.
Let's do the laws.
That's it. There's no real solution that he offers. He just offers a bunch of criticism while almost entirely omitting the big government policies and the far leftist, the corporatism, the crony capitalism, the borderline socialist policies that have created these problems, and then doesn't offer a solution. Well, let me offer a solution. Okay, let's start with doing something different. How about we lower corporate tax rates? Just in line with Like John Oliver's home country, just in line with like Europe, okay? Let's stop with the crazy red tape, fees, the cost burdens. How about this? No more bailouts, or we've been doing it for decades. No more bailouts or federal subsidies for any business ever, period. So let's lower the costs of entering any kind of a business. Let's lower the taxes. Let's lower the regulations that impede competition and prevent small business owners from entering the workplace. And then to ensure that small businesses can compete on an honest playing field, no more bailouts, federal subsidies for any business, for any reason ever, period. Watch small businesses do a whole lot better. Hey, did you enjoy this video? Here's the thing, you're here, this is the end of it, so we don't care because you already watched it. But if you really didn't like it and you want to justify it, leave a comment below telling us why you didn't like the video. And if you liked us, let us know. And subscribe to the channel, because that lets the overlords at YouTube know that, you know what? You're all right.